Now, a special report from Carol Evan Investigates.
Unqualified doctors, inadequate tests. Veterans denied benefits and access to medical care. Those are just some of the findings of a year-long investigation we call Invisible Wounds. I'm Carol Evan investigative reporter AJ Legault. The story starts in a farm field here in Minnesota, but as you'll see, it's sending shockwaves all the way to Washington.
Yeah, I drove over the road with a semi for about 44 years.
Butch Amersma has spent his life behind one wheel or the other.
Well, I started when I was 14. That's all I've ever done.
But in 1968, the Spring Valley, Minnesota farmer nearly lost his life in Vietnam.
Run over a landmine with a PC.
While behind the wheel of a personnel carrier.
That's it. 3 days later, I woke up in Japan.
Butch's military records detail the price his body paid for his service to country.
Muscular skull fractures and fractured mandible, because this was just like a crushed egg.
Call it farmer humor, but Butch jokes there are still pieces of his head fertilizing Vietnam.
Never went back to get them, and I don't plan on it either.
Back then, he wasn't diagnosed with what we now call a traumatic brain injury. But for years, he says he suffered unexplained chronic headaches. So in 2012, after losing private insurance, Butch applied for benefits and treatment at the Minneapolis VA.
Pretty good one here.
Despite his record showing a severe head wound, a loss of part of his skull, he received no benefits for a traumatic brain injury, commonly referred to as a TBI. His VA examiner wrote in his records, there is no diagnosis of TBI/concussion.
I got it coming, I want it. If I ain't got it coming, I don't want it.
But our investigation turned up evidence that Butch didn't get a fair shot at benefits. That's because he was examined by someone who, according to the VA's own policies, was not qualified. In the years since Vietnam, we've learned much more about the often invisible but debilitating impact of brain injuries. So the VA adopted a rule about who can diagnose them. It's spelled out right in the VA's training manual, complete with the word important with an exclamation point added for emphasis. It's also written on every single TBI exam document a VA doctor fills out. Only 4 types of specialists, including neurologists and neurosurgeons, are allowed to diagnose if a veteran has a TBI. So what type of specialist did Butch's initial TBI exam?
It was a nurse practitioner I had in the cop thing.
That's right. Records show Butch's TBI exam was done by a Brenda Roche. She's a nurse practitioner, not a neurologist.
You take and go to your appointments, what they tell you to do, and you take it for granted they know what they're doing.
And we discovered Butch is not an isolated example. In fact, there's evidence that he's part of a disturbing pattern. Attorney Ben Krause represents a Minnesota veteran examined by not just one, but 2 unqualified doctors.
That there's no excuse. The VA has absolutely no excuse.
That veteran's records detail a concussion received in 1958 on the USS Yorktown when this heavy metal hatch smashed into his head and knocked him out. Years later, when the vet developed a brain tumor, VA neurologist Khalif Bouchara concluded the tumor, at least as likely as not, was caused by the traumatic brain injury. But when that vet went down the VA hallway to apply for benefits through Comp and Pen, he was given a TBI exam by Dr. Danny Smith, an osteopath, not an approved specialist. He concluded the veteran didn't even have a TBI.
They concluded he did not have traumatic brain injury when in fact he did, and it was clearly in the record.
So Krause filed an appeal. Official records show the VA agree that Dr. Smith was not qualified to have done the TBI examination. So they ordered another one, this time by Dr. Ephraim Gabriel. He also ruled no current clinical diagnosis of TBI. But get this, Dr. Gabriel is also not one of the 4 specialists who can diagnose TBIs.
And they had him conduct the exam anyway and drag my client through the dirt.
So a veteran was denied benefits after exams by 2 different doctors who were not qualified TBI specialists, overriding the finding of the VA's own highly trained neurologist. Dr. Bouchara, who then authored this scathing memo about the errors made and wrote that Dr. Smith and Gabriel failed to consult with an expert in the field that could have provided a competent medical opinion.
Dr. Smith and Dr. Gabriel should never have conducted the initial TBI exam for my clients.
So Kraus filed yet another appeal, and the Minneapolis VA finally had a truly qualified comp and pen doctor examine the veteran who agreed he had a TBI. Now he gets more than $1,400 a month in VA benefits.
Had he just gone away, he would have been shy $1,000 a month for the rest of his life.
We wanted to know just how many initial TBI exams were done by the same two unqualified doctors. In response to our FOIA requests, the VA admitted that since 2010, they've done 127. In all, records show that out of the 21 medical professionals who performed initial TBI exams at the Minneapolis VA since 2010, only one of them was a TBI specialist. VA officials refused to answer our questions about unqualified doctors on camera. But just one day after we aired Butch's story, the VA issued this statement admitting it did conduct some initial TBI evaluations with providers who were not specialists. How many improper exams were there? The VA refused to say.
That's government. Don't want to get me started on government.
Coming up, our search for answers is just beginning, and it's prompting a national investigation.
If it happened in Minneapolis, it's possible, and I would argue probable, it happened elsewhere.
Log online to the Department of Veterans Affairs website, and you can find the name and certification of every VA doctor at every VA hospital anywhere in America. In spite of that, the VA has a secret it wants to keep. Denied. That's what they repeatedly wrote us when under FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, we asked for names of employees performing initial traumatic brain injury, known as TBI exams, in compensation and pension departments at VA hospitals around the country. You may be asking, why do we want that information?
I still got wires up here and in my jaw yet. They'll never come out.
It's because of veterans like Butch Hammersma. The Minnesota farmer left part of his skull behind in Vietnam when he drove over a landmine.
First time I looked in the mirror, I thought I was done, got killed.
When we discovered that veterans like Butch had been examined by unqualified VA doctors,
This was a nurse practitioner I had.
we wondered, how many more cases are there? At first, the Minneapolis VA tried to minimize the problem with a statement saying a small number of initial TBI exams were not performed by the required specialists. But we wanted to know, is it just a small number of TBI exams being done by unqualified doctors like the VA claims, or is it more extensive, both here at the Minneapolis VA and at VA facilities around the country? But trying to get those answers for veterans like Butch is where we ran into a locked gate. Remember those denial FOIA letters when we and reporters at our sister stations across the country began asking for the names of doctors who've performed initial TBI exams? The Department of Veterans Affairs suddenly started claiming that's private information that won't contribute significantly to the public's understanding of the activities of the federal government. We're appealing that decision, but Congress is already asking questions. Representative Tim Walz says he's been told more than 300 Minnesota veterans were affected, and there could be others nationwide.
If it happened in Minneapolis, it's possible, and I would argue probable, it happened elsewhere.
But the VA's denials didn't stop us from digging deeper into the qualifications of VA doctors. For months, Carol Evan's been investigating cases of misleading information about VA doctors posted on the VA's own website. Claims of board certifications that the doctors don't really have. Example, Dr. Ephraim Gabriel. The Minneapolis VA claims in black and white he's board certified in public health and general preventative medicine. But when we fact-checked that, we found there's no record of him ever holding any board certification.
Board certification is very much about the public trust.
Dr. Lois Margaret Nora is president of the ABMS, American Board of Medical Specialties, the group the VA says certifies its doctors.
That tells people something very important about their physician's training, about how their physician has been assessed and what that physician does every day as part of his or her practice.
At the Tomah, Wisconsin VA, we discovered the doctor who treated Candace Dellis's father right before his death was not board certified in emergency medicine like the VA claimed.
And they're lying to the veterans that are coming into the medical centers for care.
Our sister stations found the same problem. In Buffalo, New York, they sampled 133 doctors and found 26 that did not have the certifications the VA there claimed. It was a similar story in Denver. Doctors who'd never earned board certification and others who were long expired.
Is the investigation.
Our findings have congressmen demanding an official investigation.
We have great concern, and we're grateful for the Care 11 investigation.
Still to come.
Car bomb.
The Army said this blast caused a permanent brain injury. So why doesn't the VA agree? This story begins in the war zone that was Kirkuk, Iraq in 2006. See that car driving down the road? Let's apply the brakes for just a moment. What you can't see in this video is the car is about to cross paths with a patrol led by a tough young scout platoon leader named Captain Charles Gatlin. Okay, back to the car that is about to change Gatlin's life
Car bomb.
forever.
And detonated. And when it blew over the wall, we were in the debris field. And I went down. Noticed something hit the back of my head. I've subsequently diagnosed with a moderate TBI.
TBI, that's traumatic brain injury.
Than what it used to be.
It would lead to the end of Captain Gatlin's military career.
I had to leave the Army.
In the years following the explosion that gave Gatlin his brain injury, the Army did 3 full batteries of neuropsychological workups.
And those things, they're terrible. But probably 8 hours apiece.
They found a number of problems, including persistent frontal lobe dysfunction. The final exam in 2009 concluded that since it was already 3 years post-injury, Gatlin's deficits are likely to be stable and permanent. So the Army permanently retired him with a 70% TBI disability. And the Gatlins moved to Montana.
And that's where the problem started.
To qualify for VA benefits, he was told to report for a re-evaluation at the Fort Harrison, Montana VA. Records show a VA psychologist named Robert Bettine ignored the Army's more thorough test and used a brief screening tool called an R-Bands, originally designed for dementia patients. Based on that short R-Bands test, Dr. Bettine found if Mr. Gatlin had a cognitive impairment in the past, it's likely that this has resolved.
I saw this man 20 minutes, and then a decision was made.
After that brief exam, the VA dropped his TBI disability rating dramatically from 70% to just 10.
I mean, this is ridiculous.
The Gatlins appealed, but they got nowhere with the VA.
And they didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to hear it at all.
But surrender is apparently not in the Gatlins' DNA. They came at the VA with a new strategy, filing this complaint with the State Board of Psychologists. After reviewing the case, the board, at the time headed by Dr. George Watson and Dr. Stuart Hall, agreed with the Gatlins.
We felt that in this case, the person had been shortchanged.
Our board thought that the process used by Dr. Bettine was deficient.
So deficient that the state board sanctioned the VA psychologist, ruling he violated accepted standards of practice when he based his diagnosis on the R-Bands. The state board wrote, the R-Bands is not an appropriate tool for determining the effects of mild TBI.
It was not sensitive enough to do what the VA purported that it was supposed to do. And so we reprimanded the psychologist.
The doctor in his defense stated he was just following VA policy, that the R-Bands evaluation he conducted is the same one that's conducted at VA centers throughout the United States.
You think there's other veterans out there who may not have gotten a fair benefits rating because of the screening and the exam that was performed?
The way that process is set up, I think that that's a very likely reality.
When we reported that unqualified doctors were performing TBI exams here at the Minneapolis VA, it raised questions about hundreds of specific cases here. But this ruling out of Montana now raises very serious questions about one of the tests the VA is using nationwide. The medical board found that the R-Band's training manual itself indicates mild impairments cannot be detected.
That process is not going to pick them up, and so they're going to be labeled as not having cognitive difficulties.
When in fact they very well might.
When they very well might.
But the VA refused to abide by the Montana ruling, writing to the psychology board, state rules don't apply to federal facilities.
The VA said that what Dr. Bettine did was consistent with VA protocol. What does that statement tell you?
Well, it tells me that the VA protocol is not appropriate for all patients that are coming through for C&P evaluations with TBI issues.
If he's right, it means that life-altering deficits from brain injuries suffered by veterans surviving explosions like this can be easily missed and TBI benefits denied.
I mean, this is, yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem.
When we continue, what's being done to fix it? Welcome back. We've been telling you about problems we've uncovered, and we're pleased to report in the wake of our investigation, there's action. Here's the story of a Minnesota veteran finally getting the help he needs after years of painful delay. Plainview, Minnesota, a town so welcoming, even the corn waves. For Anton Welke, it's home.
Everybody always makes a comment about our steer. Oh, you're from Plainview? You got the steer?
Maybe it's the flagline streets, but Plainview seems to be the small American town where service to country,
Grandpa, Laverne, he was in World War II.
Is in the blood.
This one's my dad. He was in the Army. He was in Vietnam. And right here's mine.
Anton served on the flight deck aboard the USS John C. Stennis.
I think it's everyone's duty. They should do it. That's why I did it.
But that service very nearly cost him.
I'm like, we're not going to make it. This is not working.
Not just his marriage to wife Christina, but almost everything.
Almost made me take my own life. Go.
Just what could spark a man who appears to have so much to live for, to contemplate,
it's right in here somewhere,
ending it all? The answer lies buried in the pages of his military records.
I've never read any of these.
On a night when battle station alarms were sounded on board the Stennis.
There it is. April 6, 2002. Running up ladder well, hit head on bulkhead.
Bam, I was sitting on the ground and grabbed my hand and there's blood all over it. And I was just kind of like, whoa.
A heavy metal hatch.
There was some vomiting.
Slammed down on his head.
Just took me down to medical and got me stitched up and went right back to work.
The blow to the head was soon forgotten, but it wasn't long. A few months before the young sailor started exhibiting unexplained issues.
Sleeping was one of my main issues. I would fly off the handle. Bad anger issues.
I started realizing that the guy that I married I wasn't really sure who was going to wake up every morning.
After leaving the Navy, Anton and Christina returned home to Plainview and started a family. But the once happy-go-lucky Anton seemed to be battling
Dr. Jekyll and Hyde, you know.
An ever-growing list of internal demons.
I just get mad at my wife, or I get mad, I lose feeling in my arms, and just I'm so drained, I can't stay awake.
He has a sleeping disorder. He has a mood disorder. He has panic disorder. He has been diagnosed with PTSD.
In 2012, believing Anton's issues might be related to his military service, his private doctors at Mayo recommended he go to the VA for help.
I truly thought I was going for help.
The VA sent him to their compensation and pension unit.
And he's trying to tell them, I need help. Not I need money, I need help. Help me.
Because of the old blow to the head detailed in his service records, Anton received a traumatic brain injury or TBI exam. Records show Dr. Wanda Blaylark did no neuropsychological testing and found no diagnosis of TBI. Anton went home with no TBI treatment and no answers.
It is. It's a big thing to sit and wonder in your head. Am I nuts?
The veteran found himself at his church.
I had nothing left in me. And
spending hours on his knees,
prayed to the Lord,
contemplating taking his life.
I didn't care no more. I was physically and mentally tired.
Looking up and in, Anton found strength through faith and family.
I knew still had something to live for.
In our most intimate moments have looked at me in the eyes and said, I'm trying. Like, I don't want to lose you guys.
But there was still the question, why did he have these problems? 3 years would pass before the Welkes got an answer. It came after KARE 11 began investigating how the VA had been using unqualified doctors to conduct TBI exams. As we began pushing the VA for answers, Anton and more than 300 Minnesota veterans were notified the doctors who did their original TBI tests were not qualified, so they'd be getting new exams with proper specialists.
He actually did tests with me. I wasn't a number finally. I was actually getting care.
Well, he said to you before you even left, without a doubt, you have a traumatic brain injury, and thank you for your service.
That finding by a qualified TBI specialist threw open the doors that the VA previously closed. Anton's now receiving treatment and cognitive therapy in the Minneapolis VA's top-notch polytrauma center. But he's left to wonder why the VA used a doctor not qualified to diagnose his injuries and denied him the help he needed for the past 3 years.
Yeah.
One veteran finally getting the help he deserves, one of many, we hope, getting better care. Congress is taking action too, demanding a nationwide review that's currently underway of how the VA handles traumatic brain injury exams. We'll let you know what they find. I'm AJ Legault. On behalf of all of us here at KARE 11 News, thanks for joining us.
Reporter AJ Legault joining us. And AJ, we now know exactly how many Minnesota veterans were affected, right?
Yeah, that's right. While Minneapolis VA officials, including Hospital Director Patrick Kelly, have refused to go on camera and answer questions about brain injury exams performed by unqualified doctors, they are required by law to respond to Freedom of Information Act, known as FOIA requests, for records and data. After months of waiting, we now know exactly how many Minnesota vets were denied a fair shot at treatment and benefits for brain injuries suffered while in service to country. From the war on terror,
I paid a price,
to the killing fields of Vietnam,
I got all blew to hell.
military veterans and their families who've turned to the VA for help and benefits because of brain injuries suffered in the line of duty have shared with KARE 11 stories of being misdiagnosed, denied access to medical care.
This process almost made me take my own life.
And rejected for benefits.
No, you're good to go. Move on.
But in many cases, they weren't good to go. VA records clearly state only 4 types of specialists, including neurologists, are allowed to diagnose whether a veteran has a traumatic brain injury known as a TBI. But records obtained by KARE 11 show out of the 21 medical professionals who performed initial TBI exams at the Minneapolis VA's compensation and pension clinic since 2010, only one of them was a TBI specialist.
Right here's mine.
That means veterans like Anton Welke were seen by unqualified doctors.
Literally, that doctor that did it looked at, she goes, oh, where'd you get hit in the head? And I pointed to it, and she kind of ran her fingers a little bit like this. She goes, oh, I guess I don't see the scar.
In Anton's case, records show Dr. Wanda Blaylark did no neuropsychological testing and found no diagnosis of TBI. But when KARE 11 began investigating what the VA called a small number of veterans, including Anton, received letters notifying them that they were eligible for a new TBI exam. But from our FOIA requests, we know since 2010, 321 veterans were seen by an unqualified doctor. To date, 181 vets have received a new TBI exam by a proper specialist. Of those, it's been determined 50 were previously misdiagnosed by the Minneapolis VA.
It's a big thing to sit and wonder in your head. Am I nuts?
50 veterans, like Anton, originally told they didn't have a brain injury. But a TBI specialist
Throw it to Fisher, Gloria.
has now determined they do. So they're now eligible for treatment and benefits previously denied.
I wrote a check for my life saying, hey, I'm here to serve my country. Now it's your turn to take care of me. give me the medical attention I need.
Carol Levin and our parent company, Tegna, are still fighting with the Department of Veterans Affairs to release records that will allow us to determine whether other VA hospitals across the country have also been using unqualified doctors to diagnose brain injuries. So far, that's a secret the VA has been unwilling to part with.
For the past year, Carol Levin has been investigating whistleblower allegations of record falsification to hide long delays at the Minneapolis VA.
Those allegations are still under federal investigation. Tonight, AJ Legault is here asking why it takes some veterans more than a year just to get a hearing aid.
Now, the top two reasons veterans across the country go to the VA are for hearing-related problems. Tonight, the story of a veteran desperate to hear his wife's voice who turned as a last resort to Carol Levin Investigates for help.
Good night, my darling.
At 78,
I love you.
Denny Madsen is a man who's only ever adored
always
one woman. Years of letters.
I'm always thinking about you.
Airmailed across the Atlantic during his time in the service.
I miss you.
Tell the tale of young love.
It'll be just a short time and we can be together.
Their first date.
She wouldn't let me kiss her on that first date, though.
Was 61 years ago.
We were juniors, just before the junior prom, going with each other ever since.
Denny and Darlene just celebrated 56 years of marriage.
I don't think we ever had an angry word in that time. Just unbelievable. Let's go home.
Life changes. Love doesn't.
Quite a gal.
Hospitalized in March at the Mayo Clinic due to a series of strokes, Darlene struggles to speak above a whisper. Denny struggles just to hear his wife's voice.
What'd you say?
I need to get up.
While he fondly recalls his time in the Air Force as a jet mechanic, it damaged his hearing.
We didn't use any kind of hearing protection in those days.
Denny wears an old pair of hearing aids he paid for out of pocket, but says for more than a year he tried getting seen at the Minneapolis VA, hoping for a newer, better set.
And after about a year or so, got this letter that, yep, we got an appointment up at Minneapolis at the VA.
That was in November. He had an audiology test. The VA agreed his hearing loss was service-connected and okayed him for hearing aids.
They said it could take quite a while, but I would receive a letter of when I would get fitted with it.
Like passing scenery, Christmas and New Year's came and went, as did January.
1 month went by and then another month.
And February. And March.
And that's the letter that just never came.
Denny's hearing aid delay is a situation that sounds all too familiar to veterans across the country. In fact, in this audit done last year, the VA's Office of Inspector General found the VA was not timely in issuing new hearing aids to veterans.
Oftentimes, a veteran who needs an initial exam or a hearing test will wait 2 weeks to 1 year.
And that's the wait just for the first test, as U.S. Representative Sean Duffy of Wisconsin told a congressional committee last April.
And then their hearing aids are ordered. It's 2 weeks to 1 year before they actually get the hearing aid itself.
Duffy and Minnesota Congressman Tim Walz have been pushing bipartisan legislation for the past 2 years. They claim will help alleviate the long waits.
It is a problem.
The OIG audit also found cases in which audiology staff put in the incorrect desired appointment dates. That's a way of manipulating the VA's computer system to make veterans' wait times appear shorter than they actually are.
That seems to go back to the very issue that's created the scandal at the VA system-wide.
And I said I can't express my anger and my frustration at it, but I would be disingenuous if I said I was overly surprised.
Denny doesn't know if there's been any funny business with his records, but he also doesn't know how much longer he'll have the opportunity to hear his wife's voice.
Great times.
The VA told him Denny's November hearing test was no longer valid. To get the hearing aids he'd been promised, he'd need to get his ears retested.
I want to check to see how soft you can hear words, okay?
Okay.
Say the word baseball.
Baseball.
Oatmeal.
I didn't get that.
This hearing test was done at a private audiology facility that contracts with the VA.
You can't hear me? Wow, I didn't know it was that bad.
After doing molds of his ears, The doctor here told him normal patients get their hearing aids in 1 to 2 weeks. But with the VA, all bets are off, and it could be a month or longer before his hearing aids would be delivered.
Good.
Remember, at this point, he's already been waiting about 16 months. With Darlene's health no sure thing, and Denny desperate to hear her voice.
But we're going to make it. We're going to make it.
Carol Levin went to work, contacting the VA and numerous lawmakers.
This is correct.
When we told Congressman Walz Denny's story,
This gentleman's case is heartbreaking because
he got on the phone and called Minneapolis VA Director Patrick Kelly personally. The hearing aids arrived 1 week later.
Well, that feels good.
Congressman Walz even showed up for the fitting.
Well, they're a good fit. Hello, Darlene.
Rushing back to Darlene.
Look what I got.
Denny couldn't wait to share the news.
And I got the new hearing aids. If I'm not in the room or something, you can talk to me, and it'll go right to my hearing aids. It's all wireless.
And soak in some precious moments listening.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
To the voice of the woman that's had his ear.
I can wake you in the morning.
Yeah, yeah, you sure can.
And his heart
Yeah.
for more than 6 decades.
Wow, you're great. Looking great this morning. Dressed you up nice.
Quite the couple. Well, things can certainly happen quickly when a congressman gets involved, especially one who sits on the Veterans Affairs Committee. But Congressman Walz is quick to point out the VA should be that responsive whenever any vet calls them with a problem.
Oh, wow. What a couple they are. And
They're incredible.
And we have to know, how is she doing?
She's continuing to get better. She is in a rehab facility now. She was in the Mayo Clinic for several months, getting treatment after her series of strokes, but all things are looking positive right now.
Oh, that's good to
So
hear.
you got
AJ.
Walz and Duffy working on this to try to push this legislation. Tell us where this is at right now. What's happening?
Well, basically, what their legislation does is it would allow hearing aid technicians to handle some simple appointments rather than full doctors of audiology. That, however, is an idea that's controversial among doctors.
Well, when the VA found itself in the middle of a wait time scandal last year, the Department of Veteran Affairs and Congress made a few changes. Those changes included a new program called Veterans Choice, aimed at letting veterans see non-VA doctors closer to home.
But some veterans say they don't have a choice at all. AJ Legault is here with a Carol 11 News investigation. AJ?
Yeah, that $10 billion Veterans Choice Program launched in November. To use it, veterans need to be stuck with a long appointment delay or live more than 40 miles from a VA facility. But when you add in government red tape, we discovered 40 doesn't always mean 40.
This is trazodone, and I can't sleep at nights because of the pain.
Paul Walker served in the United States Air Force.
That's more pain medicine. It's morphine.
Injured in an accident while serving, he's dealt with chronic pain for nearly 3 decades.
Oh, I'll keep praying.
But that pain pales in comparison to what he's living with now.
Since this cancer pain started, that's trumped that. It's a lot worse.
Pain so severe, Paul says he can't even clean his home.
I'm ashamed.
He spends most of his days in bed or on the couch.
Back in January 30th, I was diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer, and I have a massive tumor on my liver the size of a baseball.
From Big Lake, Minnesota, where Paul calls home, it takes a trip of more than 50 miles by car to see an oncologist at the VA hospital in Minneapolis. Because of all the pain meds he's on, Paul's not allowed to drive. He thought he was a perfect candidate for the new VA Choice program he'd been reading and hearing about.
The Veterans Choice Program is one of the ways VA is trying to improve access to care.
This VA video makes it sound simple. You can qualify if
your current residence is more than 40 miles using a straight line distance from the closest VA healthcare facility.
But it's not so simple, as Paul found out when he actually tried applying, using the choice card Veterans Affairs sent him.
I tried using it, and I got flatly turned down.
That seemed hard to believe, since Paul lives more than 40 miles from the Minneapolis VA. So Paul called again while we watched.
I want to see about getting pre-authorization to get cancer treatment at a facility closer to me.
Again, he was denied.
I'm not eligible under mileage.
Why? while the Northwest Metro VA clinic in Ramsey is only 20 miles from his home. But get this, Paul says they don't offer cancer treatment at the clinic.
But all they do is dental work there and eye work and some basic different, kinds of minor things. But I have cancer, stage 4. And
Paul's reasoning that the clinic near him doesn't offer the treatment he needs gets him nowhere.
This is not a facility that provides oncology or cancer care. Common sense should kick in somewheres here. I don't get a choice. I get to die.
Paul is not the only veteran questioning whether there's any real choice. The sound of reveille, courtesy of a flock of trumpeter swans, is music to the soul of retired Technical Sergeant Mark Gendron as he seeks relief from his PTSD, walking along his remote property overlooking the Crow Wing River.
And out here in the country where I am, you can actually talk to God and do it by yourself privately.
But sometimes he also needs to talk to a psychiatrist. It's nearly 70 miles to see a psychiatrist at the VA in St. Cloud, but there's a private one just 8 miles from Mark's home. An example of how Veterans Choice could work.
It connects you to timely and convenient access to health care in your community.
But Mark says he too was denied.
I don't feel it's fair at all.
Mark was turned down because he lives not that far from the Brainerd VA clinic. But they don't have a psychiatrist on staff to help with his PTSD.
Why would they give everybody a card and say that this health care is available outside the VA if you can't use it?
It's a question being asked by a lot of veterans. A survey last week by the VFW found 80% of those who thought they qualified for outside care were not afforded choice by the VA.
And I've been hearing this across the country.
Ben Krause is a disabled vet himself and Twin Cities-based attorney focusing on veterans issues.
You had the lump in the abdomen, right? As I recall.
I've got the massive tumor.
He's representing Paul Walker and has harsh words for the choice program.
A bill of goods that they sold us.
Krause, in his blog, points to the fact the VA is now claiming since so few veterans are using it, the billions sitting there to fund Veterans Choice could have better uses.
And now they're trying to justify the fact that veterans aren't using this choice, there's really no choice at all, as a means to defund the entire program and move the money elsewhere.
Members of Congress are voicing similar concerns, claiming the VA is interpreting the 40-mile rule too narrowly.
Many veterans who should qualify for the choice program have been denied access by the VA.
Just last week, pushing the VA's top man for answers.
We are currently exploring options to review the 40-mile provision of the Choice Act to get more veterans the care that they want.
While Washington debates and the VA explores, veterans like Mark Gendron looking to the skies for internal peace, and Paul Walker,
I enjoy life.
Fighting for life itself.
I enjoy, seeing my kids.
Are left with no choice at all.
I guess I'm a walking dead man.
The Minneapolis VA tells us 270 vets have been allowed to get care outside of the VA under the Choice program, but they also told us, quote, no veteran is turned down. They either meet the criteria, which is more than 40 miles from a VA facility or more than 30 days for an appointment, or they do not. As you just saw, some Minnesota veterans would argue that's not exactly the whole story. Randy and Julie.
Now to a continuing Care 11 investigation. Veterans claim they're being denied the medical choice they were promised. Investigative reporter AJ Legault has an update to our report that's getting the attention of lawmakers in Washington and veterans from across Minnesota. Grateful too.
August 7th, 2014, the Commander-in-Chief addresses the growing VA scandal.
We've discovered some inexcusable misconduct.
And with much fanfare, signs the Veterans Access, Choice, and Accountability Act.
If you live more than 40 miles from a VA facility, or if VA doctors can't see you within a reasonable amount of time, you'll have the chance to see a doctor outside the VA system.
But 7 months later, our investigation found veterans like Paul Walker, who has stage 4 cancer and can't drive because of his pain medicine, being denied that promised choice.
I'm not eligible under mileage.
While the Minneapolis VA is more than 40 miles away by car, a VA outpatient clinic is much closer. They don't offer cancer treatment, but the VA still denied Paul permission to get treatment closer to home.
Song and a dance. So sad, so bad, can't do nothing.
Many other veterans have also been denied use of the choice program under the 40-mile rule because the VA has decided to measure the 40 miles as the crow flies and not actual driving miles.
Their current residence is more than 40 miles using a straight line distance from the
But
closest
look at
VA
the law President Obama signed. It says nothing about the 40 miles being in a straight line. That's just the way the VA has chosen to interpret it. An interpretation outraging veterans across the country.
And the VA has had a choice there. Do they want to interpret it in favor of the veteran, or do they want to favor the VA? And what we've seen so far is that the system is continuing to favor itself.
After we aired Paul's story, viewers flooded our Facebook page with similar accounts. Linda Tester-Lease writes, "Since when do people travel like a crow flies?" And Jensen writes about her father denied use of the choice program because of a clinic near him that does not offer what he needs. She says, shame on those in charge of this program.
It's all propaganda. They aren't trying to help veterans out.
In the wake of our report on the Veterans Choice Program, Minnesota Congressman Timothy Walz wrote this letter to VA Secretary Robert McDonnell urging him to take action. The congressman asked the VA look to provide a greater degree of flexibility in interpreting the 40-mile provision of the Choice Act and take into account if the veteran can actually receive the care he or she needs at the particular VA medical facility. We'll let you know if that action is taken. And if you'd like to read Congressman Walz's letter in its entirety, you can do so at KARE11.com.
It's great work, AJ. So frustrating, too, especially when they say, well, there's a clinic by you, but it doesn't provide the care that the veteran needs.
Yeah, it's driving veterans all across the country and all across Minnesota just crazy.
Just it seems like common sense has been left out of the equation.
Yeah.
That it does.
All right.
Thanks for the update.
AJ.
Another update tonight, this one following a recent KARE 11 investigation. That investigation exposed veterans being denied access to private medical care promised to them under the Veterans Health Choice Program. Today, the VA took action. Investigative reporter AJ Legault joins us tonight with the update. AJ?
Julie, we're not crows, we can't fly, and when we need to see a doctor, we take a car. That's the message veterans from all across the country have been sending to the KARE 11 investigative unit since we first started reporting on the Veterans Choice Program and how the VA was measuring veterans' travel distances using as the crow flies mileage. Today, the VA swapped out that measuring stick.
I'm not eligible under mileage.
That's Air Force veteran Paul Walker, who's dying of liver cancer, being told he's not eligible through the Veterans Choice Program for cancer treatment closer to his Big Lake, Minnesota home.
I tried using it and I got flatly turned down.
Veterans like Paul and Mark Gendron, who have to drive long distances to get to a VA hospital, have been finding themselves left out in the cold by the Choice Program that was part of the Veterans Access, Choice, and Accountability Act signed last August by President Obama.
Why would they give everybody a card and say that this health care is available outside the VA if you can't use it?
In the wake of our investigation, Congressman Tim Walz and Senator Al Franken fired off letters to VA Secretary Robert McDonnell, citing KARE 11's report and calling for changes. Just last night, Jon Stewart's The Daily Show harpooned the VA over the Choice Program. Paul Walker thought he was a perfect candidate for the new VA Choice Program.
Unless the next part of that sentence is, and it turned out he was.
Playing clips from our report.
But I have cancer.
Wouldn't happen to be tooth cancer, would it? We're just, come on, what's the deal, VA?
Today in a Senate hearing, the VA announced it was changing the way they measure the 40-mile rule.
We're going to change the distance criteria from straight line to travel distance.
The rule change announced today commendably relies on common sense rather than flying crows in assessing the real-life consequences to veterans.
It's progress. It's a
While disabled veteran and Minnesota attorney Ben Krause applauds the change.
We're not a crow, and when frankly we're glad in this instance that the crow's finally dead.
He and other veterans believe more changes to the program are still needed. For example, Paul Walker still won't be able to get the cancer treatment he needs. While the Minneapolis VA is more than 40 miles away by car, the VA outpatient clinic in Ramsey is much closer. They don't offer cancer treatment, but the VA still claims that nearby clinic exempts Paul from the Choice Program.
You can't get health care at a particular facility, that it shouldn't count.
Lawmakers at today's hearing seemed to agree and promised quick action.
So if there is a legislative impediment, let's fix it. Let's get it done, because our intent is to see to it the veterans get the service.
Yes.
Now,
The VA claims today's change to the 40-mile rule will roughly double the number of veterans eligible for the choice program, as well as double the estimated $10 billion price tag. Both Senator Franken and Congressman Walz issued statements today about the VA changes. You can read those at KARE11.com. Julie.
KARE 11 continues its year-long investigation into patient care at the Minneapolis VA. What investigative reporter A.J. Legault has uncovered now has a member of Congress seeing red. A.J. joins us live with the story. A.J.?
Julie, what we uncovered is this memo written last April by the number 2 man at the Minneapolis VA. It shows management was aware of scheduling practices taking place that were at best making things inconvenient for veterans and at worst putting their very lives at risk.
I'm really irritated by this, really angry, really angry.
What has Minnesota Congressman Tim Walz hot under the collar is this memo obtained by KARE 11. It was written by Minneapolis VA Chief of Staff Dr. Kent Crossley on April 29th of last year. It spells out a number of improper scheduling practices taking place and says these practices must cease immediately.
This seems to very clearly say, when it says these practices must cease immediately, that says they've been going on.
They were happening, that they were happening at the time. Yeah, absolutely.
But just 2 weeks after the memo was written, Congressman Walz was briefed by Minneapolis VA management and told, despite the growing national scandal, there were no integrity problems here.
And I sat in that room with the Legion commander, with the VFW, when they told us this. And when I went out and took press, I said, I have been told that we do not have this here in Minneapolis.
There is no wait list to the best of anyone's knowledge in Minnesota.
You've been burned.
Yes, yes.
I feel like they need to be exposed for what's really going on.
Last year, KARE 11 reported about whistleblowers who claimed the Minneapolis VA was keeping secret lists in order to make wait times look shorter and help managers earn big bonuses.
And it's all about making the numbers look good, regardless if it's damaging people.
Dr. Crossley's memo doesn't specifically mention wait lists, but does tell staffers to stop cooking the books by claiming appointments were canceled by the patient when in fact they were canceled by clinics, and that some areas of the VA were outright canceling veterans' appointments due to lack of access. In this email, written within a day of the memo, an administrative officer claims she's heard complaints that schedulers told veterans, I can't schedule you or my access metrics will take a hit and I'll get in trouble.
Because when you hear things like this, it taints the whole system.
Dr. Crossley's memo states that when patients from St. Cloud are referred to Minneapolis and there's no capacity, the patient should be fee-based. That means the veteran is sent to a private doctor to ensure they receive timely medical care. That didn't happen in the case of Marine Corporal Jordan Beisman.
70 days just is too long.
His mother shared with us his medical records, which show the St. Cloud VA didn't have the neurology specialist he needed, so he was referred to Minneapolis. He passed away while waiting almost 70 days for an appointment. The congressman is wondering now why he didn't get the whole story.
On this one too, I would argue, while it makes me as angry, and we'll get to the bottom of it, it doesn't shock me.
We asked for an interview with Minneapolis VA Director Patrick Kelly. In response, we got a 2-line statement about the memo from Minneapolis VA spokesperson Ralph Husner that reads, the specific scheduling issues identified were potentially serious, but not thought to be widespread. These examples were used to highlight the need to directly address the issues, be transparent, and act with integrity in our scheduling practices. Congressman Walz is now directly questioning the Minneapolis VA's transparency, and after obtaining his own copies of the memo, fired off a letter to the VA Inspector General asking for the memo to be part of the still ongoing official investigation launched in the wake of our initial reports last year.
It's been just a great job of reporting. We appreciate it. Thank you, AJ.